are extraordinarily difficult times. 2020 will be the year that is remembered as the year of COVID-19. But the huge challenge of a global pandemic has brought out the best in us. We came together to support one another. We owe thanks to those that have been on the front line, keeping us safe and healthy, protecting our NHS, and making sure that we have vital lifeline services. And there is hope as we look forward. There are times when a nation's future must be in its own hands, and the last year has demonstrated why now, more than ever, that is vital. The SNP has been at the forefront of Scotland's drive for Scottish independence since 1934. Since then, we've collectively made a significant impact. We've broken new ground. We've helped to engage the nation with politics like never before. We've grown in number, with support for Scottish independence now the majority view of the people of Scotland. We've broken electoral records with elected representatives across Scotland. We've delivered progress for Scotland, building a fairer and more equal society. We've stood up for Scotland against the damaging policies inflicted on us from Westminster.
It took us 300 years to get our Scottish Parliament and 20 years for this place to put a bulldozer right through it.
And we're now working hard every day to provide hope and a plan for recovery at a time when the country needs it most.
These are extraordinary and unprecedented times. I want to thank you for all your efforts so far. We've all sacrificed so much to protect and support each other. By looking out for those in your community, you're helping us to find a way forward. And next year, we have the most important election in Scotland's history. It can chart our course to independence and determine the future for generations to come. Now really is a time for hope. Now is a time to plan a better future.
Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Hayley Matthews. I'll be your host for this afternoon, guiding you through the next 2 hours. And we've had an eventful morning, but there's still so much more to come. First, I'd like to welcome again our BSL interpreters, Paul Belmonte and Lou Howie, who will be with us for the rest of the afternoon. Plus, you'll see some live subtitling below, so everyone has full access to this year's annual conference, the first virtual one. Now, coming up, Shona Robinson and Neil Gray update us on the Social Justice and Fairness Commission. Plaid Cymru leader Adam Price joins us from his home in Wales, and we have our policy debate on social justice and equality. A really packed afternoon for you to all enjoy, so let's get the show on the road. The Social Justice and Fairness Commission was established by Nicola Sturgeon to consider how to make Scotland a more equal and socially just place to live. Convened by MSP Shona Robinson, the Commission has 18 members. We'll hear first from Shona, followed by Vice-Convener Neil Gray, and I'm delighted to say Shona and Neil are also joined by Rob Gibson and Julia Staherska and Michelle Campbell. Shona, good afternoon. The floor is now yours.
Laura, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
You can hear me but not see me.
We can't see you. We can see Shona and we can see Kirsten. Good afternoon to you
Hello,
both.
conference.
Hello.
I hope you can hear me.
Yes,
it's
we can.
good to see so many of you here, albeit in our new virtual world that has become so familiar over recent months. And thanks to the many of you who have already engaged with the work of the Commission individually and through your branches and constituencies. And I invite those who've not had a chance to get in touch as our work continues. Today, my Commission colleagues will give you a flavour on the key areas of our work. But the overriding aim of the Social Justice and Fairness Commission is to deliver a real and tangible route map to our continuing goal of independence. Our shared goal of a fairer Scotland that values and cares for everyone who lives here, from baby box to ripe old age, a society in which everyone can fully participate with abundant opportunities to flourish. The Commission has spent the duration of the pandemic speaking to individuals and organisations about their experiences and views of how we build a more socially just Scotland with the powers of independence, but also what we need to do now as we recover from the ravages of this virus. We've been looking at transformational policies, such as how to create a secure income for all, which the Deputy Convener of the Commission, Neil Gray MP, will say more about next, and of course, many of which will require the full powers of independence to fully deliver. We've also looked at more immediate measures that learn the lessons from the pandemic and could help recovery, such as our detailed consultation on the reform of social care and the creation of a national care service. The responses have told us that we need to tackle care being undervalued as a sector, recognise the gendered nature of the work, and critically address pay and career progression, which a national care service, I think, could deliver, but it must involve the third sector and unpaid carers as equal partners. We hope that this can form part of the solution to the challenges faced by our care services, and we look forward to the outcome of the independent review. Conference. To make our shared vision a reality, tackling poverty must be our #1 priority. We're often told that Scotland has 2 governments, but it's clear that only one of them has the political will required to make radical change happen. Westminster only holds back our aspirations and potential. To put it in perspective, we have control over just 15% of social security spending, with the vast majority still controlled by the UK government. So let's compare and contrast the values and approach of both these governments and the impact on poverty. In Scotland, we're building a social security system based on dignity, security and respect, a system designed with the people who use it at its heart. In contrast, the UK government demonise and disrespect those who require support, put barriers in their way and remove their fundamental right to dignity in the process. It is indeed a tale of 2 governments. With independence, we can build on the progressive policies of the Scottish Government, like the groundbreaking Scottish Child Payment, but unconstrained by a constitutional ceiling on our ability to effect further transformational change. We can really think afresh about the kind of policies we could pursue and how we make those decisions at every level in Scotland. With independence, we can reset our society, one where the economy serves us, the people, and not the other way around. The pursuit of economic growth in of itself does not deliver for the vast majority of people. We need to measure our success by what our economy delivers for us, based on improvements in our individual and collective well-being, not simply GDP growth. And that's the focus of our work on delivering a well-being economy. With independence, we'll have the powers to enact the bold and progressive measures to tackle the deep-rooted causes of poverty that have blighted opportunity compounded by the inaction of successive UK governments. And with independence, we can provide that vital safety net that has been systematically dismantled by Westminster. But we want to do more than just ensure that people get by. We want to deliver a quality of life, fair work that fits around our lives, security for those who can't work, and the opportunity for people to shape the decisions about their communities and our country. We want to ensure that everyone has access to an affordable warm home, and we also want to play our part in tackling global challenges like climate change, help to build peace and deal with a global refugee crisis. Delivering social justice isn't a luxury, something that we aim for when times are good. When times are tough, it's even more important that we have a society that delivers social justice and fairness for everyone who lives here. The pandemic has shown us how tough times can be and why we need to grasp the opportunity to change society for the better. Independence is this opportunity, and it is within our reach. Conference, I'm going to end where I started. Everyone has been affected by this pandemic, but not everyone has been affected equally. Some have lost family members, livelihoods, and the poorest have become poorer, bearing the brunt of the pandemic. Recovery cannot be allowed to fall on the shoulders of the poorest and the most vulnerable. There must not be a new era of austerity. How we fund the recovery and ensure that it's done on a fair basis requires debate and agreement now, and we need to be radical in finding solutions. So here's an idea. During the pandemic, many big corporations have made significant profits due to the different ways of working and shopping, leading to vast financial gains. The same large companies have also benefited from a holiday on business rates and are rightly coming under growing pressure to hand back almost £1.9 billion after sparking outrage by rewarding shareholders with hundreds of millions of pounds in payouts at the same time as claiming business rates government discount. Therefore, conference, I believe it's essential that those businesses which have benefited the most through the pandemic also contribute to recovery, with the focus of that recovery on supporting those individuals and families who have been impacted most. So, instead of freezing public sector pay, scrapping the proposed increase to the national minimum wage, and failing to extend the £20 uplift to universal credit, the UK government must instead look to those with the broadest shoulders and consider a windfall tax on those businesses which have seen excess profits during the pandemic, raising much needed revenues to help ensure a fairer and more socially just recovery from this pandemic. The past few months have demonstrated that change is possible and that our ambition is constrained only by what we collectively consider desirable. As we hope to emerge from the constraints of this unprecedented global pandemic, let's emerge with the hope and confidence that together, now and with independence, that we can change our society for the better, for all, forever. Thank you for listening, conference, and I'll now hand over to Neil Gray MP, who's the Deputy Chair of the Commission, who's going to tell you more about our work on creating a secure income. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Shona. It's a pleasure to speak to you today, conference. Our mission for independence must be to deliver a fairer society that finally addresses poverty in this country. Child poverty rates in Airdrie and Shotts are sitting just under a third. Across Scotland, it is almost 1 in 4, or 230,000 children living in poverty. And the Scottish Government forecasts that without intervention, it could reach 38% in the next 10 years. While the Resolution Foundation predicts child poverty could hit 29%, the highest ever level, by 23-24. These figures get so much worse for children living in a family where someone has a disability or in a lone parent household. And we should never accept this as being okay. Children living in poverty feel more excluded, embarrassed, unhappy, and it impacts their life chances. They're more likely to have health issues, more likely to find it harder at school and miss out on social events that help their development. And too many of us know what that feels like and never want it for our children. And one of the big dividing lines in politics is between those who see poverty as just unfortunate and those of us who consider poverty as an injustice not to be tolerated. Poverty is not an inevitable part of life, and with concerted effort across all levels of government and society working together, we can do the right thing by one another. The Scottish Government, with the limited powers it has over key policy areas, is taking the right steps. The new child payment has been described by fellow anti-poverty campaigners as game-changing. There is also the Best Start grant paid at key stages of a child's early life. This replaced the UK's Sure Start maternity grant, but the Scottish Government enhanced and expanded support. That investment means the Scottish Government has made 17 times more payments through the Best Start grant than the UK Government equivalent. And the Scottish Government's leadership sees Scotland with the highest level of people receiving the real living wage in these isles. But we know that the key drivers of poverty arrive from Westminster. Social security cuts, employment law, the minimum wage and economic policy. We can ensure we all have what we need for a good life and build a well-being society, but it is clear, to deliver the big changes required to society, we need the full powers of independence and the public's support. That is where the work of the Social Justice and Fairness Commission is going to be so important. To really develop a good society, we need the right policies and the right policy-making processes that can involve people and take people with us. Scotland's new social security system has been developed with co-production, involving the people who really need it and use it. That is a fundamental shift from the paternalistic top-down dictatorial approach of the UK social security system. By using the knowledge of experience, we are much better placed to get the system right for us all. But we know that to really shift the dial and tackle the horrible scourge of child poverty, we need to do more. In the early days of independence, the Scottish Government will need to take quick action to fix the system we inherit, but thereafter, a new system will need to be created that not only provides protection, but releases potential. The Social Justice and Fairness Commission has been consulting at all stages and picking up on the best ideas out there from different groups and bringing them together into a coherent blueprint of how we build a fairer and good society. I want to thank delegates and members on behalf of the Commission who took part in the 3 days of National Assembly regarding secure income and putting forward their views on UBI. And as a Commission, we want to see independence deliver a secure income guarantee. And we have looked at UBI or a minimum income guarantee as possible ways of delivering that. We can see from the spending review that when we have our independence referendum, we are going to have a choice of two futures. Brexit Britain with austerity on stilts, where those on the lowest incomes will pay the biggest price once again, or building a good, fairer, well-being society with independence. Our children can't afford to take the chance any longer. They need independence. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce Julia Stahushka to talk about how a welcoming Scotland helps us all reach our potential.
Thank you very much, Neil. Conference, in an independent Scotland, we will have the ability to have a rights-based approach to social justice, social policy and immigration to ensure that all those who choose to make Scotland their home have access to a secure income, a safe and secure home and a free, high-quality health and social care service. Scotland prides ourselves in being open, inclusive and welcoming towards those from diverse backgrounds. And we have embraced the term New Scot, which highlights that anyone who chooses to make Scotland a home will be welcomed with open arms and treated fairly and equally, no matter how long they have lived here and what they have contributed. The work of the Social Justice and Fairness Commission values the contributions of migrants, and we have a clear aim to create an accepting, forward-looking and progressive nation where eradicating poverty and providing high-quality services will be a key aspect of our day-to-day life. As I stated to conference last year during the Scotland's Future panel, where Brexit and the Tory government look to build walls, independence seeks to smash barriers and welcome all citizens with open arms, ensuring that they are treated as a fair and equal part of our society. Several Scottish Government reports, including the Scotland's Population Needs and Migration Policy paper of 2018, have highlighted the significant number of benefits of inward migration to Scotland, both economically and culturally. Our asylum system should aim to provide security for asylum seekers and work in close partnerships with the communities in which they live. Making asylum support a key part of Scotland's social security and employment systems would aid with integration and truly reflect the commitment to working with and for the people who use our services and reside in Scotland. Providing a transparent approach based on communication, touching upon the need to develop policy which seeks to advance equality, human rights and embed a non-discrimination commitment with policy making. All those who make Scotland their home and seek asylum in Scotland should gain a right to work. For some, the current lack of possession of the same entitlements as others in society compromise their equality of status. Here, they will be equal. Scotland should be able to attract talented and committed people from Europe and across the world to work and study here without excessive barriers, and our migration policy should support flexibility, partnership and innovation. Our higher education system should remain to be accessible and available to all, and we as a country should capture and develop talent and reaffirm that our education system should reflect the diversity of a modern Scotland, both in students and indeed teachers. Our migration system should be easy to access and understand and be focused on what individuals can contribute, not on their ability to pay. Therefore, fees and charges should be proportionate, if not scrapped. Conference, in an independent Scotland, we will not put profit above people. Currently, for many, security starts with a secure immigration status, but access to that is too complicated, too difficult and too expensive. On a personal note, it took me uploading 5 different documents in total for my status to be secured. Otherwise, it would have been denied. And if I wanted to gain UK citizenship, the process would cost me £1,400 and a Life in the UK exam, on top of the likelihood of months of stress, anxiety and insecurity. Our migration system must be much more accessible, simpler and transparent, and our fees must be fair and affordable to all those who choose to make Scotland their home. We won't have the immigration health surcharge, a lengthy and unnecessary process of providing applications and evidence that you're worthy enough to live in the country you call home, or a Home Secretary who is so embarrassingly proud of scrapping the free movement. Conference, the Social Justice and Fairness Commission outlines exactly that Scotland has full potential to reach the status of an independent nation state within the European Union, which is truly equal, fair and progressive. We value fairness, compassion, dignity and respect, and our actions truly reflect those key principles, which are the core values of Scottish and European society. It's a pleasure to now introduce Rob Gibson, who will outline the aspects around the Commission's work in homes and communities.
Thank you very much. I hope that, hello, thank you very much. I hope that you're hearing this. And we are, as a conference, addressing the aim of a fair, socially just, independent Scotland, and that needs a route map. That's the task that you set us, and a key element is building homes and communities. Whether you live in an old house awaiting renovation on Ulva, the recently community-owned island, or live in a high-rise in Springburn, or a prosperous suburb in Edinburgh, or a small town in the Mearns, this is for you. If you struggle to pay your rent, face eviction from a private landlord, are unintentionally homeless, desperate to get enough room for a growing family, escape from a leaky, drafty let, this is for you. Affordable homes mean more than a roof over your head. Social justice needs warm, safe, secure, as well as affordable, and to live in an empowered community. Building enough homes for everyone needs more. It needs the right kind of homes in the right places. The Commission addresses this task. We all know devolution lacks the powers. Take the housing cost element of universal credit. Take the key elements of tax on housing, such as the tax treatment of mortgages. Conference, independence is key to take control of capital gains and inheritance tax. Why? In an independent Scotland, we propose that housing should become homes, not assets to invest in. And house builders and house building is currently dominated by the market, where big players gobble up small builders and land bank for their own building plans. Rebalancing the speculative model has begun to some extent. Housing associations, community-owned land, and local authorities are our social housing champions, but they need much more investment clout. We must prepare to take off for a housing policy to blossom with independence. Planners and planning need rules to meet community needs, not builders' profits. Conference, let's hear it for the Scottish Land Commission and its deep-ranging land for housing research. Set up by our radical 2016 Scottish Land Reform Act, they have reported that land value tax could help deliver Scotland's land reform objectives and raise revenue in a progressive way. Some say, get it done now. Heed the Scottish Land Commission, sort planning law, align business rates, complete the land register. Their studies show that European exemplars, and they highlight the urgent need for land value capture. This is the Social Justice Commission a recommendation, and we applaud it. Conference, the time to set LVT in motion is now. It's key to unlock affordable land for housing. Conference. Housing data collection can't be a one-size-fits-all for rural and urban needs. Scattered communities need social housing just like town dwellers. In rural Scotland, houses sell at eye-watering prices far above the incomes of young people who grow up there. These young people demand practical repopulation with choices for all ages to have a sustainable future, occupying passive house standard homes that are adaptable throughout life. Urban communities also require the right to master plan green space, allotments, nearness to transport, locally owned shops and services that so many in Europe already have and do. We will spell out how to turn overwhelming backing for community empowerment into a reality. If you want to achieve the best for your family, your street, and a thriving community, then the Commission's detailed proposals are for you. Our route map can build affordable housing, alleviate poverty, and capture land values to pay for the investment independence can deliver. It's fairness and social justice for all of us who live in our country. Conference have said it's about all who wish to live in our country. Councillor Michelle Campbell sums up our work so far and emphasises the roles of equalities. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you. An evolving and fairer independent Scotland must recognise societal values which will change. Our starting point in becoming an independent Scotland can only deliver fairness and social justice through equity in both opportunities and outcomes for our well-being. Equality isn't pick and mix. We cannot claim success if we do not ensure that an independent Scotland offers systemic equality for all. Eradicating poverty is key to achieving this. Another factor that is key to us delivering a fairer nation is fair participation. The Social Justice and Fairness Commission has so far engaged with a broad spectrum of individuals, organisations, branches and constituency associations. And we are grateful to all the input and ideas to help shape our vision in delivering our independence. We encourage every single person here in this conference and for you to invite people and organisations you know from all walks of life to take part. It's the only way that we can shift no to yes. Let your views and ideas be known. We will build a strong, independent Scotland together. You can check out our website at www.socialjustice.scot or like, follow and engage with our social media pages on Facebook and Twitter. Independence is coming. We can be world leaders in tackling poverty and inequality to deliver for the livelihoods and well-being of our people in an independent, inclusive Scotland. Thank you.
And a very moving speech there from many of our speakers. Now, we're joined by Plaid Cymru leader Adam Price. A little bit of background on Adam. He was born in Carmarthen into a mining family, and following a stint as an MP, a Harvard degree and a fellowship, he sat in the Welsh Parliament since 2016. He was elected leader of Plaid Cymru in 2018, and we're delighted that he joins us from his home in Carmarthen. Good afternoon.
Friends, Carajan, Gyfeillion. I can't see you, I can't embrace you, we can't chew the fat or sing karaoke, but as people and parties, we've never felt closer. From the solemnity of the COVID storm has come a determination which has united our nations and a resolve to rebuild. In this, the season of reflection and preparation, we look back at lost times and lost loved ones, but also forward to strengthening new bonds and embracing a new beginning. Our virtual world has exposed a new reality. The small things in life became the big picture, while health and wealth collided like never before. COVID has crossed continents, exposed excess, entrenched inequality, and laid bare the fragility of our being. It has struck everywhere. But how governments have struck back will be the defining issue of our time. Your government has done just that, striking back with the consistency and conviction envied by many across the world under the outstanding leadership of your First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon. Nicola's grace and gravitas, a rare quality of moving seamlessly between that steely gaze and glowing smile, has shone a light on the darkest of days. Meanwhile, in Downing Street, the pandemic has exposed the worst excesses of Westminster rule: dubious PPE contracts, a calamitous testing regime, and a Tory chumocracy which is growing by the day. In Wales, they stole our tests. In Scotland too, they denied furlough. And now they're aiming fire at devolution itself. When it comes to Boris Johnson, with every word, his reputation wanes. The only disaster is the Prime Minister himself, the greatest recruiting agent independence ever had. Make no mistake, at this rate, the crumbling palaces of Westminster will outlast the Union itself. With any luck, we won't have to pay for the refurbishment. The challenge now for our nations is not to be footnotes in someone else's history, but the authors of our own. How do we guarantee people opportunity in youth and dignity in old age? How do we create a greener, kinder economy which preserves our planet for future generations? Now that the clapping has stopped, how do we take care of our carers? The devolution dividend will only take us so far. The real answer to all these questions is independence. Today we may be physically apart, but we've travelled far since we last met. Support for Welsh independence is at an all-time high. Polling shows that 72% of people in Wales don't trust Westminster. 59% want Devo Max. The right to govern ourselves, so long discounted in our discourse and derided as a pipe dream, has moved from the margins to the mainstream. People are joining Yes Cymru quicker than David Marshall's reflexes, and with as much delight as those conga celebrations. I've never needed much encouragement to visit Scotland and march to its indie tune. At times I felt like a Sherpa helping the climbers, willing them on, but no more. Our common goal now shares a common time frame. The Welsh awakening is catching up with the Scottish surge. But the higher up the mountain we climb, the harder we must work, though every step we take now brings us closer to that final ascent. That's why 12 months ago I commissioned the most detailed work ever published on Welsh independence. I will be responding formally to the Independence Commission's report before Christmas, but the wider independence movement owes a debt of gratitude to its members under the chairpersonship of Plaid Cymru's former parliamentary leader, Elfyn Llwyd, for their diligent work. As befits an arm's-length commission, it asks some searching questions and has undertaken extensive analysis as we consider a clear pathway towards the independence we need as a nation. And we need independence now more than ever. The Chancellor's reward for the sacrifice and struggle of public sector workers is the poison pill of a public pay freeze. Where they build back bitter, we have a blueprint for our countries, not just to be equal nations alongside all others, but nations of equals, fair and free, where freedom is the key to the flourishing of all. Now we know we can't zoom our way towards independence without building teams to make it work. That's why my party is undertaking its most wide-ranging consultation ever on independence. We will draw on expertise from within the Commission to engage with our members and hold a historic special conference in the new year, keeping true to the old adage that there is no I in Wales, but there is a we. And we, Scotland and Wales, are on this journey together, which is why my first official phone call as the first pro-independence First Minister of Wales next May will be to your First Minister. We can further cement and enhance our relationship in the Indie Summer of 21 by coming together, all under one banner, in a Celtic summit to map out our common aims and purpose as independence and mutual cooperation becomes the new normal. First, we, like you, have an election to win. Over the coming months, Plaid Cymru will be making the case that changing Wales for good will only come about through a change of government. We will fight the election on the most radical and transformational prospectus seen since devolution, and we will re-energise a laboured managerial machine. And giving the people of Wales the right to decide on their future as a nation will be central to our plans. Let no one be in any doubt that I will lead a team and a party clear in its aims, united in its goal, committed to holding and winning an independence referendum as soon as we can. It is this common cause which is the bedrock of the bond between our sister parties ever since Winnie Ewing's seminal victory in Hamilton was cheered on in Westminster by that crowd of at least 200 Welsh supporters with our first MP, Gwynfor Evans, at her side. Just like those hundreds of Welsh campaigners who campaigned for Scotland in 2014. On the day itself, I was in Murrayfield, and I've never yearned there for a Scottish victory before. But it's canvassing a Glasgow tenement that I will never forget, and a gentleman in his 80s climbing 4 flights of stairs, gasping for air because he wanted to say thank you. But it's you we should be thanking, because the Scotland you are creating is an inspiration to us all. And that's why, when our independence comes, then you are all invited. And I ask you not just to join us then, but to join us now. Many in Plaid Cymru have become members of the SNP in recent years, and I'm one of them, inspired by the energy and hope exuding from the Yes campaign. By joining Plaid Cymru in return, you can help us ensure that not just one, but 2 sister nations will very soon win their freedom and join the global family of independent countries. Just like Winnie and Gwynfor showed, we have taken it in turn to stand on each other's shoulders, but this is a fight we will win together. And win it we must. For the hill farmer in the Highlands and the steel worker in Port Talbot, for the fisherman in Fraserburgh and the haulage firm in Holyhead. These are the ones that must be protected from the perils of a Westminster government hell-bent on a reckless Brexit at any cost. As our workforce face being tariffed to oblivion and our governments bypassed by the power-grabbing UK Parliament, we say no more. No more deceit, no more disrespect, no more dodgy deals devised by Dom or anyone else. Our time has come to forge our own union, a Celtic union, as inclusive, outward and forward-looking, our patriotism based on the progress of all of our people. Now that's a union worth joining. See you soon, Scotland, and stay safe.
Thank you so much, Adam, for that wonderful content. Now, let's move to the next item on the agenda, our policy debate on social justice. And for this, I will hand you back to the lovely Kirsten Oswald and Angus MacLeod. Kirsten, over to you.
Thanks very much, Helen. And what a great afternoon session so far. So conference will round that off with our final resolution for today. That is the resolution entitled Social Justice and Equality. And to move the resolution, we have Aileen Campbell, MSP for Clydesdale and Cabinet Secretary for Communities and Local Government. So welcome to Aileen.
Thank you. Kirsten, conference, it is a pleasure to be with you this afternoon and to move this important motion. It's important because it speaks to the reason why we are all part of this movement, striving for self-determination. Independence isn't and never has been an end in itself. It's a means to an end, which will see our country empowered with the tools and the levers needed for the creation of a fairer, just and equal Scotland. But that has never stopped our party or our government from doing all we can to create fairness and equality with the powers we have. But the reality is that as long as the main tools to drive the big systemic changes we needed desperately to see in our society remain with the UK government, we will always be limited to tackling poverty and inequality with one hand tied behind our back. Despite the limitations on our powers, we do have a record to be proud of, and I'm immensely proud to have been part of a government that has done so much to make Scotland fairer and more prosperous. In particular, the revolution in early years, from the transformational increase in childcare provision to the Best Start grant, and of course the baby box, will leave its mark on Scotland for generations to come. And our work to support some of our most vulnerable children, raising the age looked after young people can leave their care setting, is a positively life-changing action taken on the basis of listening and responding to the young people themselves. And as Community Secretary, I've had the opportunity, along with my colleague Shirley-Ann Somerville, to lay the groundwork and introduce the Scottish Child Payment, probably the most ambitious anti-poverty measure undertaken anywhere in the UK, which will start making payments to families across Scotland in February. I'm also proud that the SNP has done so much to stand up for women, whether it's improving gender balance on public boards, action to tackle the gender pay gap, standing up for the pensions of the WASPy women, or opposing policies like the abhorrent rape clause. Most recently, I've had the ministerial responsibility for taking forward the Scottish Government's world-leading initiatives to tackle period poverty, and MSPs from right across the chamber deserve great credit for working together to deliver on our shared ambitions. Our record of achievement and action driven by a determination to support our people is in direct contrast to a UK government that has presided over a decade of austerity, callous welfare cuts, a benefits freeze, and has recently decided to cut overseas aid budgets. They are blind to the trauma they cause, detached from anxiety they create, and distant from the potential that they fail to help realise. Conference, it really is a tale of two governments, with the last 9 months illustrating in sharp focus how the moral compasses that guide and direct the actions of the UK and Scottish governments are pointing in completely opposite directions. As a result, people in Scotland can now see the journey we can embark upon, the future that we can have, and the type of Scotland we can be if we choose to embrace independence. The last 9 months have brought undoubted challenges, with the use of the word challenge feeling like the understatement of the century. COVID-19 has shone an uncomfortable light on the deep entrenched inequalities that, despite our best efforts, still persist in our society. While we've all been impacted by this awful virus, the truth is that it is those with the least that have been hit hardest. People on low incomes or precarious work, our minority ethnic communities, disabled people, women and single parents. People already struggling, hit hard by the restrictions put in place as we adapted to try and keep ourselves safe from the virus. In amongst that, and alongside the obvious trauma and suffering that COVID has brought, there have also been countless acts of kindness, solidarity and compassion as communities, the third sector and local authorities collectively stepped up to look after one another. As a government, we have sought to act swiftly to support that endeavour. Early on in the pandemic, I announced £350 million to support that community effort, with funds going to volunteers, mutual aid and support, third sector and local authorities. We have sought to maintain the principles of dignity and human rights as we advocated a cash-first approach to food insecurity. And we've worked with our third sector partners, community anchors, third sector interfaces and councils to help administer that support. We saw partnership and collaboration happen at a pace and scale that many of us across public life have been trying to coax and encourage for some time. We heard of families being equipped to cope far better with the pandemic because support was rooted in the community and was non-stigmatising. We heard of homeless people being swiftly supported with person-centred, holistic care and as a result, settled into accommodation. And we saw people befriended and supported and looked out for. We all had to rapidly change how we did things, even though the unfortunate prompt was a nasty virus and a global pandemic. That shift in policy and practice, that trust we placed in our communities, and that decoupling from the shackles of red tape are actually things we do not want to lose. So this experience and the opportunity that we have to disrupt an I-beam culture is too precious to miss. Because if we grab it and harness it, the outcomes and the outlook for our people, communities and country start to look more positive. It's never been enough to simply recover from this pandemic, but to instead reform what we do and reimagine what we can become. Since early in the pandemic, everyone was urged to stay at home, with a safe and secure home suddenly becoming an important public health tool. Staying at home, however, was a whole lot easier if you had a home that was safe, warm and secure, if it had a garden, or if it was connected to the internet. We already knew that housing was about so much more than bricks and mortar, and COVID reaffirmed that. The value of a home in that its place is where we want to live, work and play and bring up our families. We want everyone to have a safe, warm place they can call home, put down roots and feel part of their community. And that is why we've committed to ending homelessness and rough sleeping, and why we prioritise affordable housing. We are the government that abolished right to buy, brought in modern tenancies and mitigated in full the bedroom tax to keep over 70,000 households secure in their tenancies. And we are the government that since 2007 and over our time in government has now delivered nearly 96,000 affordable homes. And that commitment will continue with this government. We've not yet set the budget, but I can commit today that ahead of the spending review, we will provide at least £500 million of funding next year. This means we can provide certainty now that affordable homes will continue to be delivered beyond this current parliamentary term, ensuring that many more families and individuals can get access to somewhere they can feel safe and secure. COVID has also necessitated that we have been separated from our loved ones. And while we cannot be physically there with them, it has highlighted the importance of being in contact digitally. Our Connecting Scotland programme was set up in response to the pandemic and aims to reduce digital exclusion by providing devices, internet connection, training and support for digitally excluded and low-income people. We've already invested £20 million and have announced a further £23 million of investment in our programme for government, which will enable us to reach 50,000 people by the end of 2021. It's already delivering results, it's keeping people together and it's transforming lives. Conference, we are keeping people safe and warm through our investment in good homes, fed by our commitment to food dignity and free school meals, and together through Connecting Scotland. The well-being of our people is our priority, and it is their well-being that will guide our ambitions for our recovery. But Conference, recovery from this pandemic won't be enough if all that ends up happening is reverting back to the way things were, and to an acceptance that somehow inequality is something that is to be tolerated or inevitable. There is a chance now to start to do things differently, to embrace the positive changes we have seen, and to build forward with activity to rebalance our economy and refocus on what matters with people and place at heart. And that is why, along with my friend and colleague Shirley-Anne Somerville, we have set up the Scottish Government's Social Renewal Advisory Board. It seeks to capture those policy changes and shifts that I described and help advise government how to navigate a path for Scotland that leads us towards equality and fairness. It will report to us with recommendations soon. And the work of the party's Social Justice Commission will also articulate the opportunities that independence can bring and paint the important picture of what Scotland can be. As many of you know, that I will not be seeking re-election next year. I first became an MSP in 2007, elected quite unexpectedly on an incredible night for the SNP. It was a life-changing moment, and I'm so glad that fate dealt me the hand that it did. The opportunity to serve constituents across the south of Scotland region and in Clydesdale constituency since 2011 is a genuine privilege. And I can honestly say that I have given everything to do my job as well as I can possibly do. And I will continue to do that until the end of the parliamentary term next year. But just as Scotland has changed significantly for the better since 2007, so have my personal circumstances. I've got married and I've been blessed with 2 beautiful boys who are grown up fast. Indeed, in 2014, I became the first Scottish minister to take maternity leave. But there is no getting away from the fact that the job, while immensely rewarding, is demanding in terms of pressure and time. So after much consideration, now feels like a good time to prepare myself for taking a step back from frontline party politics and government. At conference, my support for the SNP and independence is as strong as ever, and I look forward to continuing to campaign for Scotland to secure its independence in the not too distant future. Because it is only with independence that we can work to create the sort of country that I want my laddies to grow up in. It's only with independence that no future Scottish Communities Secretary will need to continue to engage with countless UK Home Secretaries or junior ministers to plead with them to make small changes in order to help our asylum seekers avoid destitution, hear their warm words, only for them to continue with hostile environments and punish those that have sought safety on our shores. It's only with independence that we will have the ability to end the UK's rape clause, have a full and complete social security system based on dignity and respect. And it is only with independence that we can restore powers to our Parliament in Edinburgh and shift and push the balance of power towards our communities. For me, independence is about empowerment, the chance to make and take decisions that suit our needs and benefit our people. Independence is never going to be easy, and nor should it. We will need to work hard to make it a success, and we will need everyone involved. Power cannot be retained in one place. We know that that doesn't work. Independence offers us a democratic reawakening of empowered and involved people and communities doing what they do best, looking after one another and increasing our well-being. COVID's legacy needs to signal a new and exciting chapter for Scotland, and this motion, along with the work of the Commission, enables us to bring our people and communities along with us to help fill its pages. So please support the motion.
Thank you very much, Aileen. In conference, our next speaker speaking in favour of the resolution will be Fraser Dick, and speakers have 3 minutes to make their contributions in this session. So welcome, Fraser.
Thanks, Kirsten. So I'm here to speak in favour of the motion, and in particular the section on housing. And I'm going to start with kind of my personal experience. A few years ago, my now wife and I lived in a flat that had been built by the council, bought under right to buy, and was now rented back to us at significantly higher than council rate. I was finding that about a third of my wage every month was going in rent. And then about a week before our wedding, my wife and I got notice that we were to be evicted, so the landlord could cash in, and we were forced to move back in with my wife's parents. Now, I don't share that as some kind of sob story. My wife and I are lucky in that we found another place to stay quite quickly. But I think it's instructive because it shows the power imbalance between landlords and tenants in this country. And it shows the scandal, really, of housing that was built by the state to lift people out of the exploitation of the private sector and now forms an integral part of that sector. And it's not just me. Everyone who rents privately has a story of this nature, of abuses large and small, whether it's unannounced visits, spurious retention of deposits, or summary eviction. It's really not good enough. And I think if we recognise the need to control rents in the social sector, we need to give private tenants the same protection. Now, the Scottish Government has made a lot of progress in this area, bringing in an open-ended tenancies to make renting more secure. You can't just be evicted for no reason anymore, which is a great step forward. But we need to do more to tackle the actual cost of rent. The Progressive Policy Research Group, of which I'm part, has estimated that there are 30,000 kids in poverty in this country, for no other reason than the fact their parents rent privately. Rents in Glasgow and Edinburgh have risen at double the rate of inflation over the past decade, while real wages have stagnated. In some of our rural areas, a shortage of housing due to buy-to-lets and holiday-lets prevents young people from staying in their local communities. Now, let's not be afraid to call this what it is: exploitation of working-class people. In 2016, we legislated for rent pressure zones, but despite several councils being interested, none have been implemented yet, as the barriers to implementation are just too high. So what can we do about it? Well, the first thing might be to remove those barriers to introducing rent pressure zones. Let the councils who want to put them in place without having to go through the current onerous process. Alternatively, the Tenants' Union, Living Rent, has written a proposal for a national system of rent controls, where rises would be linked to improvements in the property. We could also extend the eviction ban that was put in place at the start of the pandemic to protect renters. Any of these measures would be welcome. Let's be bold in protecting the material interests of private renters. So we had a great debate on independence this morning, and that's what this party is all about. But this is something we've got the powers to fix in the here and now. We need independence for the same reason we need rent controls, to redistribute economic and political power in this country. The Independence Project cannot be divorced from the fight for social justice and for equality. They are one and the same thing. So to finish up, I ask you to vote for this resolution. Well, let's be real here. The fight for social justice does not begin and nor does it end with a vote. Join a union, join a tenants' union, and get active in your community, your streets, and your workplaces, and let's build a Scotland we can all be proud of. Thank you.
Many thanks, Fraser. In conference to speak in favour of the resolution, our next speaker is Shirley-Ann Somerville, MSP and our candidate for Dunfermline and Cabinet Secretary for Social Security and Older People. So welcome, Shirley-Ann.
Yeah, you need to go. I think I'm on there. I put that on mute. Yeah.
All those years ago. So last year, the Scottish Government invested nearly £2 billion to support low-income households and to tackle poverty head-on. And yet still, despite all those efforts, the policies of the Tory government, like the two-child cap, the rate clause, mean we are taking on that challenge of tackling child poverty, as Aileen said earlier, with one hand tied behind our back. Conference, I'm really proud of the progress we've made to further develop our social security system in Scotland. Dignity, fairness, respect. Those are the three core values that guide this process and should also guide our attempts to build a fairer Scotland. We're continuing to plan our new disability payments and doing so hand in hand with the people who will use that system. For now, those who suffer at the hands of the DWP, they do so with fear. But in the future, I want everyone in Scotland to know that this is a system which will be there for them if and when they need it. A system they can all be proud of building and being part of. And we're already beginning to make a real difference to people's lives through the Job Start Payment, Funeral Support Payment, Young Carers Grant and the Best Start Grant. Earlier this month, applications opened for our brand new Scottish Child Payment. That new benefit will give eligible families with children under 6 an extra £10 per week for each child. Payments will begin in February. It will give £520 a year per child. And yet just a few months later, in April, the UK government will cut universal credit, therefore reducing incomes by over £1,000. Conference, how can we tackle child poverty? How can we tackle the inequality in our society in a system like this? And all this, of course, at the same time as the UK government is taking us through a damaging no-deal Brexit. It is simply unacceptable. The misguided priorities of Westminster are not the ones which the people of Scotland have voted for. We know that we want more than this, that we deserve more than this, that our country needs more than this. So I know we can all be really proud of what we've achieved so far, rightly proud of what we've done. But I know, in fact we all know, that the only way that we'll ever be able to truly progress to our full potential is with independence. So we will do our utmost as a Scottish Government to do what we can with the powers that we have, but we need to win next May and win well and take us forward to that fairer Scotland with independence.
Thank you, Shirley-Ann. Now, delegates, please welcome our next speaker. And speaking in favour of the resolution, we have Siobhan Brown. Siobhan is our Scottish Parliament candidate for Ayr. So welcome to Siobhan.
Thank you, convener, and good afternoon, delegates. 2020 has been tough for all of us. Although during this global pandemic, what has been magnified is society's structural inequality. There are a few things that are important to me, and I believe to all of us as SNP members, is that we passionately believe that in making Scotland a more just and a more equal nation. Conference, I speak in favour of this resolution, as I believe that equality and human rights must be embedded throughout the recovery from COVID-19. We all want independence, and we do so for a wide range of very good reasons, from protecting our NHS to implementing progressive taxation policies and on to less aggressive foreign policy. As somebody born to Scots parents who immigrated to Australia when I was 3, then choosing to return to Scotland 20 years ago and raise my children here, this could not be more true. What Scotland can be, not what it has been, is what matters. And a greater social justice and equality must be at the heart of our ambitions for the future. Devolution, however, especially in the past decade, has created the opportunity for the Scottish Government to address some of Scotland's injustices and inequalities. There is so much to be said on our achievements, but let me just name just a few. Mitigating the bedroom tax. As already mentioned, to tackle child poverty, the child payment tax, we have to say that each child could get £520 per year, and it has to be noted that there is no cap or limit on the number of eligible children supported by this benefit, in direct contrast to the abhorrent 2-child cap and the morally unjustifiable rape clause. Scotland has the highest proportion of employees being paid at least the real living wage of all the 4 nations. Scotland has the smallest gap between median pay for the disabled and the non-disabled. Only Scotland and Wales pay the living wage to all NHS employees, and Scotland was the first to pay the living wage to all public sector employees. The introduction of the funeral support payment, and yesterday's announcement by the Deputy First Minister, if the SNP win next year, let's say when the SNP win next year, the SNP will extend universal free breakfast clubs and lunches to all primary pupils. This will ensure that no primary aged child in Scotland will go hungry as we recover from the COVID crisis and also face global economic uncertainty. We have a record in government we can be proud of, a record of investment in the NHS, free higher education, lower council tax bills in the rest of the UK, baby box, free personal care, and our most recent achievement in making Scotland a more just and equal country is being the first one in the world to provide free period products to anybody that needs them. Friends, these are the things that are going to lead us to independence, bringing everybody with us. Conference, we're all aware of the UK government making an unprecedented assault on the powers of the Scottish Government. For the sake of all society and the future generations of Scotland, this must not be allowed to happen. Conference, I ask that you support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Siobhan. Conference, our next speaker, speaking for the resolution, is Graham Campbell. So welcome to Graham.
Conference, thank you, convener. I'm going to begin by saying the following. Black Lives Matter. And in Scotland, that statement was made very firmly when over 30,000 people were on the streets. We in the SNP BAME network put an amendment to this, which you'll see. It's the line that says that Black Lives Matter cannot remain a platitude. It's got to mean that we have results that stem from it. Our people on the streets would accept nothing less. They made the link between George Floyd and indeed our own cases here in the UK, particularly the Sheku Bayo case, which our government has made sure there's an inquiry about. 70 million people, though, however, despite the Black Lives Matter movement internationally in the States and the brilliant way in which African Americans were mobilized to vote so that Biden won, we still had 70 million people voting for Trump. We live in an age with online mainstreamed racism. So what were the 3 main asks that demonstrators had of us? There were 3 of them. They were calling for decolonization of the curriculum in recognition of the slavery legacy. That means that the Scottish education system needs to be tackling institutionalized discrimination, whether it's in teacher employment, as Corcab Stewart spoke about yesterday, or whether it's in the actual curriculum taught by primary and secondary level teachers. We need a specialist unit that coordinates that legacy across the board. We also talked about removing institutional barriers to public life and employment. We need to lift the approach that we've had so far, which tends to tick boxes but doesn't actually set targets for organisations to achieve results. Now, I'm proud that as a Glasgow City Councillor, I moved a motion which did exactly that, gave us an aspirational target to achieve a much higher representation of black employees amongst our staff. We currently have about 2%. we are aiming to get to 6% by the end of our term here. Until public bodies are held accountable for their targets to achieve a quality of outcome, we will not really be taken seriously on this question of race equality. Now, I've been asked by BAME health workers from the NHS, heroes and sheroes of the front line of COVID, to say this. We want to see public bodies reporting back every 6 months to achieve against measured targets. And we want the 150 public bodies who have been asked by STC's Break the Race Ceiling campaign to publish their data and to make sure it's robust. Finally, the big ask from the demos was to tackle racist bullying in schools. And all of us will have had casework about this. In the call that we made in June to over 100 members of the BAME community, we saw that parent after parents had experience of racist bullying in schools not being properly tackled. And we need to be supporting the Tackling Racist Bullying Campaign's principles, 5 principles, which are a great approach to how to solve that problem, taking in parents, teachers, and pupils. So I'm hopeful that you will pass this resolution, but bear in mind that there's more to it than what is on the page. Finally, colleagues, I want to say I'm proudly embraced the word woke, which has been a phrase used by many of those online and sometimes in person to argue that equalities and arguing for it is some kind of a diversion from the struggle for independence. Well, let me tell you something. The majority of people in Scotland are women, disabled people, LGBTQI, including trans, and they are younger, they are older, and they are BAME. That is the majority. If we want to win independence, we have to win a majority. Black Lives Matter was started by black LGBT women. The Stonewall riots, which gave rise to the gay liberation movement, was started by black drag queens who have been oppressed.
I need to stop you because the time is up.
Either you're for the oppressed or you're...
Sorry to exclude, but I'm afraid your time is up now.
Apologies. That was my last sentence.
Thank you, Graham. So, following Graham conference, we're going to move on to our next speaker, speaking in favour of the resolution. And we have Kevin Stewart. Kevin is MSP and our candidate for Aberdeen Central and the Minister for Local Government, Housing and Planning. So welcome, Kevin.
Thank you very much, Convener. And I'd like to start, first of all, by thanking my constituency and private office staff and all of the civil servants that I work with for all of their efforts in helping people during the course of this pandemic. Conference, since we came to power in 2007, we have delivered over 96,000 affordable homes in Scotland, with over 66,000 of those for social rent. Delivery made possible by collaboration with councils, housing associations and the construction industry. And our plan to deliver 50,000 affordable homes with 35,000 for social rent during this Parliament was on track until coronavirus struck and construction had to be halted. However, Conference, it may take a wee bit longer, but we will still deliver all of these homes for the people of Scotland. Scotland is leading the way on housing. In the 4 years to 2019, we delivered over 80% more affordable homes per head of population than in both England and Wales. And in the same period, we delivered 8 times more homes for social rent per head than they did south of the border. Aileen Campbell's announcement earlier on of £500 million of interim investment for housing for next year is very welcome. But think what we could do if our capital budget had not been cut by 5% by Westminster last week, or if the additional billions being spent on defence and on Trident renewal was diverted to housing and social renewal. These are some of the many reasons why we need independence. We want to end homelessness. We manage with supreme effort from frontline staff, from street work, the Simon community, Bethany, Aberdeen, Ceredigion, and many others, to bring rough sleepers indoors during the pandemic. Now comes the even harder part of keeping folk in by providing the right housing and support for their needs. And thanks to the cooperation of COSLA, particularly the outstanding Eleanor Whittam, and the leadership of John Sparks and HARSAG members, we have updated our Ending Homelessness Together action plan. We will expand on our successful Housing First programme, make rapid rehousing the norm, and transform temporary accommodation. In recent months, your SNP government has protected tenants by introducing an eviction ban for those who are struggling to pay rent. We have increased resources for discretionary housing payments and are about to launch a tenant hardship loan fund. Our task to protect people would be much easier if we controlled housing benefit and universal credit, and if we could abolish the hellish and inhumane Tory policies like the rape clause, the benefit cap, and no resource to public funds. We can do all of this in a fairer, independent Scotland. Currently, convener, we're putting together our Housing to 2040 vision, looking at housing supply, decarbonisation, rent affordability, and many other issues. Let us campaign to ensure that our vision can be delivered in an independent Scotland, with a parliament with all of the levers of power. So remember to make this a reality. Both votes SNP at the forthcoming election. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. In conference, our next speaker, and speakers are to remain at 3 minutes of time, is Bob Doris. Bob is our MSP and candidate for Maryhill and Springburn, and he's speaking in favour of the resolution. So welcome to Bob.
Thank you. Conference, I want to begin by paying tribute to social housing providers across Scotland for the efforts they make to provide good quality housing and assist their wider communities on a daily basis. This is particularly evident at the height of lockdown. I want to speak about the financial pressures, however, on households in the social rented sector and the relationship with rent levels, which is the focus of the resolution at sections 28 to 33. Now, the Scottish Government has acted, of course, to assist with housing costs, such as ending the deeply unfair UK government bedroom tax and significant additional funding for discretionary housing payments, just two examples. However, housing costs remain an issue. And that's hardly surprising when you consider that over the 5 years to 2018, rents rose an average of 12.2%. That's a 6.9% increase in real terms above CPI. Between 2015 and 2018, it was estimated that 17% of people who were living in relative poverty before housing costs were taken into account. That rose to 20% once housing costs were included, and 41% were social renters. I know the Scottish Government are well aware of these matters and are carefully plotting a way forward with the Housing to 2040 vision. Affordability is a key element of that. This resolution seeks to build on that important work. A review of affordability in the social rented sector and consideration of the role played by the Scottish Housing Regulator will allow us to consider what more can be done. There are national social rent benchmarks that housing associations should use. However, it is not always straightforward to define affordability. Fuel costs, personal debt levels, part-time, low-paid and uncertain employment, a minimum wage as opposed to a real living wage, the low level of benefits and the benefits cap, just some of the factors impacting on rent affordability. And rent levels also help determine social housing providers' investment programmes. The links are clear. When social landlords consult on rent increases, they should offer a rent choice to tenants as part of that process. The Scottish Government found that just over half of tenants were informed of rent increases and a majority not presented an alternative option. Tenants can bring significant performance failure to the attention of the Scottish Housing Regulator, and this could include failure to consult on rent increases appropriately. So the mechanisms do exist, but any review could ascertain how effective they really are and whether they require more. I suspect they do. And we all want to prevent social rent levels continuing to rise in real terms. That said, of course, we heard this afternoon, with so many of the drivers of poverty and the levers of power sitting at Westminster, the real teeth that we all, of course, need is the full powers of independence, and Conference that would ask you to support this resolution this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Bob. Our next speaker, speaking in favour of the resolution, will be Anne McLaughlin MP. So welcome to Anne.
Thanks, Kirsten. Conference lines 51 onwards talk about benefit uptake and specifically mention pension credit, and that's what I want to focus on. In the coming week, as the SNP's Westminster spokesperson on women and equalities, I will launch what I hope will be a nationwide campaign to get older people to apply for pension credit. It will be nationwide if you, the members, support it, and I'll come on to that. Let me just explain that right now, only 60% of those who are entitled to, that is entitled to, pension credit are receiving it. What does that mean money-wise? Well, it means three main things. One, there are older citizens out there missing out on up to an extra £80 a week for their household. Imagine the difference that could make to them. And that's not including all the other benefits pension credit acts as a passport to. Secondly, Independent Age says the UK Treasury is holding on to £300 million per year that older people in Scotland should be getting. Think of the difference that would make if an additional £300 million was being spent in local communities, as it would be. The third thing is there is an additional cost to the NHS and social care in Scotland because poverty leads to poor health. That extra cost UK-wide is estimated to be £4 billion every year, so I'll let you work out how much it's costing our Scottish Government. There are multiple reasons why people are not applying for their pension credit entitlement. Not knowing that they can, the complicated process, the determination to make, do and mend. My campaign will address all of those issues. And my campaign is not aimed just at the older people themselves, but at their children or grandchildren, because we want them to convince their loved ones to apply for their entitlement. I want to thank Independent Age, Age Scotland and the Scottish Pensioners Forum for earlier meetings we had to look at how to do this. Age Scotland's helpline will support people through the application process, as they always have done, and I'm hoping they'll need to increase capacity soon when this campaign takes off. So that brings me on to how you can help it. Where do you come in? Well, if you're a parliamentarian, a candidate, a councillor, we'll give you access to a set of graphic templates which you can delete me from, pop your own details into and share online. There'll be template letters and press releases that you can copy and paste and use in your wards and constituencies. We're making it as simple as possible. And I'll also have materials that any member of this party can share online or any branch. Conference, everything we do must link to independence, not for the sake of it, but because we know that everything can be done better with independence. And the development of this campaign has to be what we will do differently for pensioners with independence. Will we make sure everyone gets their pension credits? I'd say we can do better than that. We've already committed to better pensions in line with some of our European neighbours, but we can't do it until we're independent. My motivation in all of this is to get older people what, as I keep repeating, is their entitlement. But I will always, whatever I'm doing, whatever I'm talking about, always proudly explain the difference that independence will make and why we need people to vote yes at the next referendum.
Thank you, Anne. Conference to speak next and in favour of the resolution is Stuart McDonald MP. So welcome to Stuart.
Thanks, Kirsten, and good afternoon, Conference. Hearing about the work of the Social Justice and Fairness Commission and its ambitions for our people has indeed been inspiring. So I wanted to speak in support of those parts of this resolution that reinforce a simple but absolutely fundamental point, that those ambitions must be our ambitions for all of Scotland's people, including those who have come to make a new home here in Scotland. Because just like any other person, secure incomes, homes and communities and health and well-being are essential to New Scots. But as we all know very well, our New Scots face many massive additional hurdles and barriers in accessing these rights. Indeed, more than any other department, the Home Office thrives on finding new ways of depriving people of their rights rather than protecting them. It truly is an institution that sees only numbers, not human beings. Focusing on asylum in particular, we have seen for years vulnerable people stuck in inappropriate, poor quality accommodation. More recently, many more, including in Glasgow, have been left cooped up in hotel rooms for month after month without a penny of support, with disastrous but predictable consequences. Those arriving on small boats across the English Channel are being crammed into disused military barracks, then removed from the country without proper consideration of their cases. And now, the Home Office is restarting evictions from asylum accommodation, imposing street homelessness and destitution on vulnerable people just as winter approaches and right in the middle of a global pandemic. It is the height of inhumanity, but there is no doubt that Priti Patel intends to make things worse with new legislation planned early next year. Conference, The Scottish Government has done some brilliant work in supporting asylum seekers, but it is independence that could really transform their prospects. The needs of vulnerable asylum seekers put front and centre. Local authorities empowered and funded to make asylum accommodation work in local communities. No lock-chain evictions, and homelessness and destitution no longer the go-to immigration enforcement policy. Pitiful so-called asylum support could be made real support, and indeed we can ask, why is it that it's separate from mainstream social security in the first place? Of course there will be a right to work, but while some argue over whether this should kick in at 6 months or 3 months, the Scottish Government integration from day one approach points to permitting work as soon as practically possible. Colleagues, these are just first steps on putting in place an asylum system we can all be proud of and ensuring all have access to social justice and fairness. So please do support this resolution, and in the months ahead, speak up like never before in defence of the rights of refugees and asylum seekers, because that support will be needed now more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Conference, our next speaker is Roanne Sicking, speaking for the resolution. And Roanne is a first-time speaker at conference. So you're welcome, Roanne.
Thank you very much. I thought I'd start by telling a story. Nearly 100 years ago, after the earthquake in Los Angeles, in a tent, acting as a makeshift school, the US government consignment of pencils arrived. There was one pencil for each white child and one to share between every Hispanic and what was then called Indian child. We're not having this. It was thankfully the teacher's sort of radical and unexpected response, and she did something that one of the little boys never forgot, the man who then later took me and others in. She snapped all the pencils in two. There, she said, everyone now has the same. So when I read the lines 13 to 17 of this resolution and saw that it reiterated the commitment to children's rights, and when I heard yesterday that already being implemented is the provision of a meal for all children in primary school, no matter their circumstances, I could only commend the resolution. Sure, physically hungry children, we know they fare worse in school than the better fed. But what the free school meal does is change completely a system that deformed the emotional and the spiritual bodies of some children who otherwise every day, year, who may later become an adult who's unhappy, angry, underperforming, even imprisoned, and sometimes abusive. Equality, commitment to social justice, the rights of children in this resolution, through the narrow case just of school meals, hooks laterally into SNP resolutions on health and social care, on sustainability, and on well-being. And this maps as examples onto things like the innovative food work, healthy food that's being promoted through Glasgow Life in the libraries. It hooks onto the sustainability work of organisations like the Glasgow Community Food Network, whose many amazing members are already playing a role in developing better school meals provision, among many other things. And it maps onto the wellbeing and food-centric creative programs that are being developed within the Scottish Prison Service. And at the core of all of them is this wonderful Scottish pillar of social justice and equality. This and other resolutions at conference need adopting, not because they're perfect. We know the perfect is the enemy of the good, but because adopting them means that they can shape the space, so that just as with school meals, life-changing stuff can be done, and where we can be who we aspire to be. The who is the big question. beneath that of reinstating nationhood. And it's the one the First Minister often speaks of, the driver of our hunger for independence. Who do we want to be as a nation? Or I suppose in another way, thinking back to the man who brought me up, more personally, what stories do we want all of our children and all of their children to be telling 100 years from now?
Thank you so much, Roanne. Haven't we heard powerful speeches from first-time speakers at conference so far? And our next speaker, speaking in favour of the resolution, is Margaret Young. So welcome to Margaret.
Good afternoon, conference. I'm going to speak on the part of the resolution that covers asylum seekers, starting at line 36 if you're looking at your resolution. I would like to pay tribute to everyone who has been involved in supporting asylum seekers throughout this pandemic. In Glasgow, where I'm based, this last summer, the pandemic highlighted the consequences of the hostile and cruel approach that the UK government has towards people seeking asylum. However, the problems that are within the housing and support services for asylum seekers did not start with the pandemic. They were the end result of many years of UK governments neglecting their moral duty towards vulnerable people. This summer, the National Audit Office reported on the UK government's new asylum accommodation and support system. It included a new independent service that was supposed to allow asylum seekers to raise issues and access support independently from the Home Office and the accommodation providers. However, the UK government either ignored or were unaware of the overwhelming need for this system, and so the system has been unable to cope. From failure to answer phone calls to the UK government's failure to provide the service with the connected information they need to assist asylum seekers. So even a year on, calls are longer than they should be and risk re-traumatising people who are already amongst the most vulnerable people in society. I also want to highlight the way the housing and support service contracts are awarded. The contract is given to a provider to provide all housing and support service needs. This means that even when there is a specialist need for a service, such as someone fleeing domestic abuse, all the provider can do is give them alternative accommodation within their provision. They cannot arrange for someone to go into a refuge. It also prevents the provider from moving someone out with their contract area as they can, so they can move to a new location for safety. I've witnessed this firsthand through my own work, and for example, when the Home Office revealed the location of a woman to her abuser, leaving her wide open to be abused again, and you can bet she was. A situation that would have been easier to manage had she been in a refuge. Also, given the financial tightness of contracts, support services are squeezed. Local authorities and charities such as domestic abuse services work miracles to support asylum seekers, but they are doing this out of already strained budgets. So, conference, I am looking forward to the day when people in Scotland will not be subject to the cruel policies of UK governments. I'm asking you to please support the resolution and show your support to asylum seekers both now and in an independent Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. And delegates, our next speaker, speaking in favour of the resolution, is Rona Mackay. Rona is our MSP and our candidate for Bearsden. So welcome to Rona.
Thank you, Kirsten. Good afternoon, conference. I'm happy to support the entirety of this excellent resolution, but I want to focus on lines 10 to 23 about the rights of the child and care experienced young people. Conference, if we can promise that no child in Scotland will go hungry before independence, just imagine what we can do after independence. This has been a tough, terrible year for so many people in so many ways, but yesterday's announcement from the Deputy First Minister must have been a real beacon of light for parents and guardians throughout Scotland. So on this theme of good things, also this year we passed legislation to incorporate the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child into Scots law by the end of this Parliament. Essentially make it a law that children's rights must be considered in everything that we do. Conference, this was landmark legislation, another game changer from our government. In August this year, we passed the Children's Scotland Bill. This will give young people a voice in all aspects of their lives, long overdue and so necessary. In the Justice Committee, we heard evidence in private from Yellow, a young expert group for improving justice and child contact, supported by Women's Aid and advocacy workers. All had experienced a fraught journey throughout the justice system. Their evidence was intensely moving and compelling, and their bravery and honesty was awesome. They spoke of their personal experiences of being victims of domestic abuse, pawns in horrible adult mind games, their feelings of not being listened to, of not feeling safe, of no one asking what they wanted when they were in court, of being invisible, of being made to have contact with someone they didn't feel safe with, and so much more. These young people will never know how much they helped the committee and Minister Ash Denham to shape the Children's Scotland Bill, which ensures that young people will be listened to and be consulted about their lives. We also heard evidence from care experienced young people, and they too contributed so much to the bill in respect of sibling relationships and much more. The care review has made them a promise that they will be given every opportunity to flourish and achieve their potential, as it always should have been. So to the 5,500 people who took part in the care review, know that we are there for you. We will keep that promise and build on the work to protect and empower you. You deserve nothing less. Conference, I'm extremely proud to represent a party which puts children and young people at the heart of everything we do, because they are the future of our independent country, and they must be seen and heard. Thank you.
Many thanks, Fiona. Speaking next, delegates, in favour of the resolution is Charlotte Armitage. So welcome to Charlotte.
Hi, good afternoon, conference. It's great to join you all, albeit virtually, to take part in our annual conference. I would like to start by echoing the resolution's praise for the Scottish Government's work in improving the care system in Scotland. I myself, as a care experienced young woman, have directly benefited from the changes made so far to improve the lives of people like me. It's because of these changes that I've now started university, and I was one of the 1,000 care experienced people our leader, Nicola Sturgeon, met with and listened to. The work already done serves as a foundation in achieving a lifetime of equality, respect and love for all care experienced people in Scotland. But as this resolution points out, there is still much to be done to ensure this goal is achievable. I was taken into care when I was 15 years old. My brother was taken into care when I was 8 and my sister when I was 10. Care for my family is an intergenerational cycle that has touched the lives of many of my relatives, and as it stands, the responsibility to break that cycle is on me. I'm 22 years old. I have no intention of having children anytime soon, but the lifelong impact of being in care means that I think about my ability to parent all the time because of my care experience. I already fear that I will not be able to break the cycle of care for my children, and I feel an enormous amount of pressure that it causes great anxiety whenever I think of having a family of my own. But conference, it doesn't have to be like this. This resolution calls on the investment in supporting families who are struggling. This is fundamental in making every child experience the kind of childhood we would want for our own. Being a parent when the money doesn't stretch far enough, when the house you live in is overcrowded, or when you're dealing with the trauma of your own childhood in care is extremely difficult. If we are committed to improving the lives of care experienced people in this country, we must not forget that care experience is lifelong. We carry this with us for our entire lives. The support we receive must reflect this. Friends, by investing in proactive measures for families that need support, we will build on the amazing work already done and the work achieved this far by the care review, and we will achieve our ambition to be the best place in the world to grow up. We have to strive to do everything that is possible to keep families together. I bear the burden of the lifelong consequences of when this doesn't happen. So please, conference, support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlotte, for that. Delegates, our next speaker, another first-time speaker today, is Eleanor Whittam. And Eleanor is our Scottish Parliament candidate for Cunningham South. So welcome, Eleanor.
Hello, thank you for that introduction. Just to let you know that I'm actually the candidate for Carrick, Cumnock and Doon Valley. Thanks very much. I could speak to you today, conference, about my work as the housing lead for the Scottish local authorities right across the country, and I would like to say a big thank you to all of the workers that have worked during this pandemic to make sure that people are kept safe. I could speak to you about the decade that I spent working for Women's Aid locally in Ayrshire, where I saw countless children forced to have contact with their abusive fathers due to the court system. I could speak to you, today as a former homelessness worker working in a rough sleeping projects and also in the council sector. And I could also speak to you about the fact that I've been homeless myself several times in my life, including being born into homelessness because there was a complete lack of social housing in my council area when I was a child. But I want to speak to you as the wee 6-year-old that I was when I stood at Prestwick Airport at the bottom of the big steps that were taking me up to the jumbo jet that was taking me over to Canada. And I want for everybody to think really carefully about the Scotland that we want to see in the future as we stare down the barrel of a disastrous no-deal Brexit, and as we have the UK government announcing an impending return to austerity. I want us to think about the Scotland that we want to see. I don't want Scotland to export any more of its people because we're lacking in all the levers of power that we need to make sure that we continue to have a socially just and equal country. I don't want any more little 6-year-olds like myself climbing those big steps of the planes. And like Siobhan Brown as well, our candidate in Ayr, told in the conference, it's absolutely awful to be that little child that finds themselves leaving a country that they love and everything round about them. Of decades of successive UK governments that just forget about Scotland. We need to make sure that if we want to have a progressive independent Scotland, that we choose to vote, both votes SNP next May, because in order to actually protect the rights that we have just now, in order for us to be able to build more housing right across the country to make sure that we have places for everybody to live in communities that are safe, we need to have independence, because without all those levers of power, we're going to see more little 6-year-olds have to leave this country. So conference, please support the resolution. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Eleanor. So our next speaker, delegate speaking in favour of the resolution is Caroline Robinson, who is another first-time speaker. So welcome to Caroline.
Thank you, conference. I live in Dunkeld and as part of the Strathday and Dunkeld branch contributed to this resolution. I'm speaking in favour of the resolution for a few reasons. The Scottish Government Ministerial Population Task Force has quite rightly been looking at the depopulation of rural areas, accepting that housing, transport and digital connectivity are all issues. We're lucky in Dunkeld and Burnham in that we have many young local people who choose to stay in our area, work and start businesses. We have the transport and digital connectivity to provide for a range of business opportunities, and local entrepreneurship is thriving. To take just one example, we have the fabulous Flora Shedden, who grew up locally, was a star on Bake Off, and started a delicious bakery in the village, hiring fellow school friends from the Royal School of Dunkeld to work for her. However, whilst we have a thriving local community, a local primary school and great transport links, a key obstacle to population growth and sustainability is the rapidly rising cost of home ownership and rental in the area. In 2019, the First Minister declared that we're facing a climate emergency. The major shift to home working during the COVID pandemic has provided an opportunity to reduce road use and rethink our car-dependent economy. However, at the same time, COVID-19 has presented a new and pressing concern. Over 2020, we've seen the rapid increase in second home ownership, and locally house prices and competition for them has soared. All those with children at the local school, with my kids, renting and waiting to buy locally or be able to move into catchment or rent locally are being priced out. The dangers this poses to sustainable local communities is real and present, and the knock-on impact it could have for Scotland as a whole cannot be overstated. This drive for second homes has inflated house prices and will have a marked effect on rental prices too. In our local area, the two large estates could also hold the power to provide sustainability for the community for the future, owning the very few pieces of land that might be developed to provide housing. In the past, small parcels have been sold off market to create more opportunities for second homes and holiday lets. whether the local estates sell their development land with conditions applied for social and affordable housing, as well as an interest in sustainability, and engage with the local community to provide community-led housing opportunities, including self-build plots for sustainable environmental development, could well determine the future of our local communities. We have a thriving local community, but it's increasingly difficult for those in key professions working locally to live here. Those who are lucky enough to find rental or home ownership options locally, school is a walk away. Edinburgh train ride and local shops and facilities serve most needs. Low carbon living is possible. However, without affordable housing to make this a reality, we instead will see an increase in people driving from far and wide to visit second homes. And the future of rural populations and economies, as well as the future of the climate, we need to act now and solve this crisis.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Delegates, our final speaker in this session, and speaking in favour of the resolution, is Christina McKelvey, MSP. Christina is our MSP and our candidate for Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse, and the Minister for Older People and Equalities. So welcome to Christina.
Good afternoon, conference. What a great debate we've had this afternoon. At conference, in a speech to the UN in 1958, Eleanor Roosevelt said, "Where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Yet they are the world to the individual person. The neighbourhood they live in, the school or college they attend, the factory, farm or office they work. Such are the places where every man, woman, child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. Without concerned citizens' actions to uphold them close to home, we shall look in vain for progress in the larger world." In 2020 conference, COVID has exposed in all its ugliness the inequalities faced by many in our nation. Equality and human rights are at the heart of everything we do in Scotland's government. Why is that? And what has it got to do with independence? Well, for me, conference, this is an easy question to answer. The Scotland I want is a Scotland that has at its heart fairness, dignity, equality, diversity, love, compassion and kindness. Until everyone has equality and human rights, none of us have equality and human rights. So my Scotland is one that values our people in all their diversity, older or younger, disabled persons, minority ethnic communities, our gypsy traveller community, lesbian, gay, bi, trans and non-binary or intersex people. You are Scotland's people and our Scotland wants equality and human rights for you. Conference, if you're a woman in Scotland today, you can look to our First Minister and her gender-based cabinet for leadership. If you're discriminated against because you're a woman, we will fight with you to end that discrimination. And if you're a victim of domestic violence, we have legislated to protect you and will educate to change the toxic culture of misogyny. Conference, we're a few days into the 16 days of activism on violence against women and girls. We mark our progress with our world-leading legislation in this area, but we also recommit ourselves to fight the violence too many of our women and girls face every single day, where for some women the most dangerous place is their own home. We have work to do, not just over the 16 days, but for every day and every year until we end this violence. Conference, independence equals fairness. It has to, in my mind, an end to racism whilst taking responsibility for our colonial past, an end to homophobia and transphobia, an end to ableism, an end to misogynistic discrimination. Conference, I believe we have the drive to take forward our ideas of that fair, independent Scotland, and in that drive we also have courage. Our diversity is our strength. Let me finish now, as I started, with the words of Eleanor Roosevelt. Courage is more exhilarating than fear, and in the long run it is easier. We do not have to become heroes overnight, just one step at a time. Meeting each thing as it comes up, seeing it not as dreadful as first appeared, discovering we have the strength to stare it down. Let's use our courage to face down discrimination and create that fair Scotland we all want, but more importantly, the Scotland that many of our people need. Support the resolution.
Thank you very much, Christina. And huge thanks to all of our speakers this afternoon on our social justice and equality resolution. So we're now ready to move to a vote, delegates. So again, if I can ask you to look at the right-hand side of your screen to find your voting button, and remembering that if you're on an iPad or a tablet, then you might see that via an arrow at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. So if you can find your voting buttons now, delegates, and please vote now.
Hello. We're determined to build a competitive and dynamic economy while tackling poverty and reducing inequality. And we place no limit on our ambitions for Scotland. In recovering from COVID, we're seizing this moment to build a better future. A decade of Tory austerity cuts has been painful for all of us, but we're delivering on our bold plan for a stronger, fairer and greener economy that leaves nobody behind. We're creating tens of thousands of new, high-quality jobs right across Scotland, all while tackling fuel poverty and cementing Scotland's leadership in renewable energy. We're delivering a digital revolution, ensuring that everybody has access to superfast broadband, tackling digital exclusion, and building a network of tech incubators to support world-leading innovation. The youngest generations must not pay the economic price of COVID, which is why we're taking bold steps to invest in young people's future. Our Young Persons Guarantee will ensure that everybody aged between 16 and 24 is guaranteed the opportunity of work, education or training. And we're delivering for the over 25s too with our Transition Training Fund. And while the Tories cut public services while handing out tax cuts to the rich, in Scotland, we've built an economy that puts people first. Scottish taxpayers get the best performing public services in the UK and the best value for money, thanks to the more progressive tax system introduced by the SNP, where 55% of Scots pay less tax than elsewhere in the UK. Scotland overwhelmingly rejected the Tory vision of an isolationist, extreme Brexit. In every corner of the country, folk are saying that we could achieve so much more as an independent country in the EU. With an abundance of natural resources, world-class universities, and a growing manufacturing industry, Scotland has the potential and the people to be a global success story. So on May 6th, let's go ahead, vote SNP to choose that brighter future.
Thank you, delegates. So I now have the outcome of the votes that you have cast for our resolution on social justice and equality. So the outcome was that we had 1,121 votes for and 44 votes against. So the resolution has been passed overwhelmingly. Thank you, delegates, for your participation this afternoon, and thank you again to all of our first-class speakers for their contributions.
Thank you very much, Kirsten and Angus, and we'll see you both back tomorrow for a very special St Andrew's Day tomorrow.
I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a good day.
Yes, and you two have a lovely evening. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's us for this evening. We are over halfway through our annual conference, and it really has been a pleasure to have you all join us today for day 2. But we're not done yet. There's still a few more highlights to come. At 4:30, you can head over to the Fringe events, and here to tell us a little bit more about one of those events, we're joined now by Jamie Szymkowiak.
Hello conference, my name is Jamie Szymkowiak, and later today at 4:30 we will be welcoming over 100 disabled members to our AGM. So see you there.
Thank you so much, Jamie. It actually sounds great, so we hope you can join that later on. Now, tomorrow morning, early birds can kickstart day 3 with a choice of Fringe meetings at 9:15, and we'll be back here at 10:30 in the morning. But until then, thank you so much for staying with us. Have a lovely evening, and we'll see you again tomorrow.